Have you ever caught yourself speaking too quickly only to regret it moments later? Perhaps you've fired off a sharp reply in anger, sent a message too soon, or made a decision under pressure that later left you uneasy. Most of us have. In that instant, it feels like our tongue or our emotions run faster than our mind. And when the dust settles, we wish for just a little more space, a pause that could have saved us from the fallout. The Stoics saw this weakness in human nature with piercing clarity. They lived in a world no less harsh than ours, emperors dealing with betrayal slaves, enduring humiliation, citizens caught in the storms of war and plague. Yet in those very conditions they cultivated an art that feels even more valuable today, the art of restraint. They discovered that the difference between the foolish and the wise is not found in intelligence alone, but in timing. The fool rushes to react. The wise pause. Epictetus, once a slave who rose to become one of the greatest teachers of philosophy, used to remind his students that every insult, every provocation, every setback was a kind of test. Remember, he said, when someone irritates you, your mind is being tested. What he meant was simple: the world will always throw sparks in your direction. You cannot control that. But whether those sparks ignite a wildfire in your chest, that Epictetus said, is entirely in your hands. I recall sitting with a friend many years ago, a man who carried himself with quiet authority. At a family gathering, an argument broke out. Voices were raised, accusations flew. In the heat of the moment, someone turned to him, pointing a finger, throwing a sharp insult meant to cut. Every eye in the room expected him to answer back. Instead, he lifted his cup of tea, took a slow sip, and remained silent. The room, tense and loud, began to quiet down. The insult, heavy when it was thrown, suddenly felt small, almost ridiculous in the face of such calm. Later, when I asked him why he didn't respond, he smiled and said, "If I had reacted, I would have become their equal. By waiting, I remained myself." That is the power of restraint. Not silence as weakness, but silence as strength. It is the pause between stimulus and response where freedom lives. Let me ask you directly, how many of your deepest regrets came from moments of silence, and how many came from words spoken too quickly? I suspect, like most of us, your list of regrets is filled not with what you held back, but with what you let slip too soon. If you've ever wished you could take back words spoken in anger, type yes in the comments. You'll find you are not alone. The Stoics remind us that it is not wrong to feel anger or hurt or indignation. These emotions arise naturally like storms forming in the sky. What matters is whether we immediately open our mouth to thunder with them or whether we let the storm pass before acting. Smart people, truly wise people, don't react immediately because they understand the nature of storms they always pass. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with more power than any of us could dream of, lived in a palace where betrayal whispered through corridors, where every decision was judged, where armies depended on his word. If anyone had reason to lash out at insult or disloyalty, it was him. Yet in his private journal, words never meant for an audience, he reminded himself again and again. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Do you see, he wasn't urging himself to win arguments. He was coaching his own heart to resist the impulse to strike back. Now, why is it so difficult for us to do the same? Because silence feels in the moment like defeat. We equate quick responses with strength, with cleverness, with dominance. But what if the opposite is true? What if waiting, breathing, and choosing carefully is actually the higher form of strength? I once worked with a man recovering from a business betrayal. His partner had cheated him, taken money, and damaged his reputation. If I don't react immediately, he told me, people will think I'm weak. So he drafted long emails, plotted lawsuits, rehearsed heated speeches. But he waited just a few days. In that space, his anger cooled and his clarity returned. Instead of a costly, messy fight, he found a measured solution that preserved his dignity and even salvaged part of the relationship. Later, he admitted that pause saved me more than any outburst could have. This is what the Stoics meant. The pause is not an absence of action, but the beginning of wisdom. It creates room for perspective. Time is an ally, not an enemy. Anger is a fire that burns quickly. Give it hours, and it dies down to embers. Give it days, and often nothing remains at all. How many quarrels in your life would have vanished if you had simply waited a little longer before answering? Here's a question worth asking yourself. What would my life look like if I gave myself a pause before every important response? Imagine the dignity, the respect, the calm that would follow you. Imagine how people would begin to see you not as someone easily provoked, but as someone steady, unshakable, grounded. Isn't that the person you would rather be? And if this reflection stirs something in you, take a moment right now to press the like button. It's a small pause, a deliberate action, a way of saying, yes, I value this kind of strength. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss the next steps in this Stoic journey. Because we're building not just a channel, but a community where wisdom is practiced, not shouted. The Stoics invite us to master not the world, but ourselves. And the first test is simple. Can you hold your tongue? Can you wait when everything in you screams to answer immediately? That pause, that breath, that silence, it is not weakness. It is your doorway into freedom. There is a saying I once heard from an old craftsman, measure twice, cut once. He wasn't talking about philosophy. He was talking about wood. Yet the Stoics would have nodded in agreement. The idea is the same. When you act too quickly, you make mistakes. When you pause, you give yourself the chance to choose wisely. In our world today, the pause is almost extinct. We live in a culture of instant replies, instant outrage, instant gratification. Think of social media, a single post, a comment, and within seconds, 1,000 replies, many written in anger or pride without thought. How many lives, how many reputations, how many relationships have been burned to ash in the flames of instant reaction? The Stoics, though, trained themselves to resist this pull. They treated every provocation as practice, an opportunity to prove mastery over themselves. Epictetus told his students to imagine insults like someone spitting into the wind. If you rush forward, you run into it yourself. But if you stand still, the wind carries it away. I once witnessed something that reminded me of this truth. A man I knew, a calm figure in his 60s, was at a public meeting where his ideas were challenged sharply, almost mockingly. Everyone in the room leaned forward, waiting for him to strike back. But he didn't. He let the silence linger. He nodded slowly, and then asked one gentle question that cut deeper than any defense could have. "Can you explain what you mean?" His opponent, suddenly off balance, stumbled in his reply. The audience shifted. The man's calm silence had already won before he spoke. That is the art of the pause. It doesn't just protect your peace, it shifts the power in the room. Those who wait to respond are seen as thoughtful, deliberate, in control. Those who rush to answer are seen as impulsive, emotional, even weak. Which one do you want to be? Think about your own life. When was the last time you gave yourself the dignity of waiting before answering? Was it in a conversation with a spouse where silence could have saved a quarrel? Was it in a heated debate at work where a breath might have preserved your reputation? Share that memory in the comments, because your story may inspire someone else to hold back the next time they are tempted to speak too soon. And if you're finding these reminders useful, press the like button now. It's a small act of pause itself, a deliberate choice, not a reflex. The Stoics also knew that waiting doesn't only benefit you, it benefits others. By pausing, you give the other person space to reveal themselves. Seneca wrote, "Anger always outlasts the harm done to cause it. If you allow your opponent to show their anger while you stay calm, they reveal their weakness, not yours." Silence becomes a mirror in which their own foolishness is reflected. Let me share a story that still lingers with me. A woman in her 70s once told me how she endured years of criticism from her in-laws. At family dinners, they would throw subtle insults, comparing her to others, questioning her choices. For a long time, she defended herself every time, until one day she decided not to. I realized she said that their words were only darts if I caught them. If I let them fall, they were nothing. She stopped answering. And something remarkable happened. The criticisms grew weaker and eventually stopped altogether. Her silence was not defeat, it was victory. That is why the wise delay their response. Because most attacks die on their own if you do not feed them. Most insults fade if you refuse to dignify them. What takes great strength is not to speak quickly, but to withhold the words burning on your tongue. Let me ask you if you could go back to one moment in your past, one heated argument, one painful fight, and give yourself a pause, how different would the outcome have been? Think of it. Write it down. And if you're willing, share it in the comments. Others may find in your reflection the courage to practice their own pause. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Join this circle of people committed to living with calm strength. In a noisy world, we're practicing silence. In a world of quick reactions, we're learning the art of waiting. The Stoics weren't against action. They weren't preaching passivity. They simply understood that immediate reaction rarely leads to wise action. They wanted us to respond not from impulse, but from clarity. And clarity takes time. So the next time you feel the fire rising in you, the urge to reply to that email instantly, to snap back in anger, to defend yourself right away, remember this: freedom begins in the pause. Take a breath, count to 3, step outside, let the storm pass even a little, then choose your words. You will never regret waiting. There's a particular kind of strength that doesn't need to raise its voice. You've probably seen it before: a person who in the middle of conflict doesn't flinch, doesn't hurry, doesn't rush to justify themselves. They listen. They wait. And when they finally do speak, their words carry a weight that shouts never could. That strength, the Stoics tell us, comes from mastering the pause. Seneca described anger as a kind of temporary madness. It seizes the mind, blinds it, and rushes it into action before reason can catch up. To pause is to give reason time to return. Think of how many quarrels in your own life lasted longer than they should have simply because you reacted too quickly. How many friendships would still be intact? How many regrets avoided if you had just given yourself a little more time? Let me share something personal. Years ago, I received a letter filled with harsh criticism. My instinct was to answer immediately, line by line, to defend myself. I even drafted the reply. But I waited. The next day, rereading my draft, I realized it was fueled by nothing but wounded pride. So I tore it up. When I finally answered, it was with 3 sentences, calm and measured. That choice changed everything. The situation de-escalated, the relationship was preserved, and my peace was intact. Had I sent my first response, I would have lost far more than the argument. Now imagine the same in your life. Picture that email you're tempted to send in anger, that argument you're itching to finish, that post you want to fire off online. What if you waited 1 hour one night? How different would the outcome be? This isn't about being passive. It's about being powerful in a way most people never discover. I want to hear from you. What's one moment in your life where waiting would have spared you regret? Share it in the comments. You never know, your story might help someone else recognize their own moment before it's too late. If this reflection rings true for you, press the like button now. It's a simple way of saying, yes, I see the value of restraint. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Join us in this growing Stoic community where we remind each other to slow down, breathe, and choose wisely in a world that pushes us to react fast. The Stoics weren't against words. They valued speech, but they valued timing even more. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, could have answered every criticism, punished every insult. But his greatness was in choosing not to. He trained himself daily to respond from principle, not from impulse. And he left us the reminder: if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Imagine if we lived by that today, how much quieter, calmer, and stronger our lives would be. There's a dignity that comes with restraint. People notice. They may not admit it, but they feel it. A person who pauses before reacting seems larger somehow, steadier, more trustworthy. In time, Others learn that your words carry weight precisely because they are not thrown around lightly. Isn't that the kind of presence worth cultivating? So here's the invitation practice one pause this week. When someone criticizes you, when traffic cuts you off, when temptation pushes you to answer, fast pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, will my reaction serve me or will it cost me? And then act with intention, not impulse. When you do come back here and tell me what happened, I want this space not just to be about my stories, but about yours too. The lesson is simple, but not easy. Reacting quickly is the instinct of the crowd. Waiting, breathing, and choosing wisely is the discipline of the wise. Which path will you take? So remember this: in every heated moment, you hold two choices: to be mastered by the moment or to master yourself. Choose the pause. Choose dignity. Choose freedom.